Hello, once this is Corey Smith with the Petersburg Church of Christ, and today I wanted to share with you a tract that I picked up out of our collection at the congregation, and this is written by Brother Alan Webster from Jacksonville, Alabama, who puts out some very excellent material, by the way. And the title of this tract is, Why Do People Hate Christians? And let's take just a few moments this afternoon. We won't spend a lot of time on this. We're going to take a few moments and look over this and share some verses as well that go along with this idea. But as a Christian, have you ever wondered, I try to do right. I'm honest and I try to be a good neighbor. I'm nice and friendly. Why doesn't everybody like me? Well, as you'll see, I have pulled up on the screen here Luke chapter 6. Let's focus on verse 26, because it's a fact that Christians will not be universally popular. Why? Because Jesus said so. Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. Notice when he says, all men shall speak well of you, woe unto you. Even Christians who avoid putting themselves unnecessarily in harm's way are inevitably persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, there are three reasons why the world hates Christians. Let's look at the first one. Go ahead, if you have your Bible, be turning to Matthew chapter 5. If you don't, Matthew chapter 5, we're going to start at verse 13. Jesus pictured saints as lights shining in darkness. Matthew 5, beginning at verse 13, Jesus says, Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt hath lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Now, light exposes darkness. Therefore, darkness hates light. Look at John chapter 3 in that regard. John chapter 3, Jesus talking about the contrast between light and dark. And he says to his followers, beginning at verse 19, And this is the condemnation. Light is into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. Paul also spoke of this in Philippians chapter 2. See what Paul had to say to the church at Philippi. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 15, Paul says that you may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. The very thing that gives influence with some sinners makes others hate us. Peter talked about that in his letter, 1 Peter chapter 2. The very thing that gives influence to sinners, others hate us. 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning at verse 9, Peter writes, he says, But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a whole nation, a peculiar people, that should show forth the praises of him that called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, but are now a people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now you have obtained mercy. A Christian rebukes sin by what he is, even without words. The Bible ethic itself is a rebuke to the sinful way of life. When the immoral, uncomfortable, persecute slander in order to justify their way of living. Now, a good example of constant rebuke of bad character. Notice in Genesis chapter 4, beginning at verse 8, Abel did not instigate the quarrel with his brother. Did you know that? And Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. Abel didn't instigate the quarrel, but when his sacrifice rebuked Cain's bad sacrifice, Cain persecuted him. Joseph's brother hated him because he was the good son, and they were not, in Genesis chapter 37. Oh, that's a good one. Genesis chapter 37. Let's look at verses 2 through 4. And Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all of his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Well, what about David and Saul? Look at 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 8 through 11. David didn't do anything to deserve Saul's anger, but his faith led to successful battles and Saul's hatred. Looking at verse 8 of 1 Samuel 18, and Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him, and he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house, and David played with his hand, and as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David, even to the wall with it. And David aborted out of his presence. Elijah didn't do the widow of godliness, but he was rebuked by his 1 Kings chapter 17. Look at that one. 1 Kings 17, verse 18. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay a son? And then Daniel. We all remember the story of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 6, verses 4, 16, and 20, Daniel did his good works quietly, but he was still persecuted. Daniel 6, verse 4, Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Drop down to verse 16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver. And he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel, King, O king, live forever. And as we know the story, yes, Daniel did survive. There was something about Jesus' life that irked the scribes and Pharisees long before he ever gave his woe unto you speech in Matthew 23. His example made them uncomfortable. Their righteousness looked dingy beside his. He was hated by many people for doing things. Jesus for doing good things. Mark chapter 3, we see where Jesus has healed the man with a withered hand in the synagogue. The Pharisees watched him in verse 2 because this was on the Sabbath day. He told him to stand forth. He said unto them in verse 4, Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they held their peace. And when he had looked around about them with anger, Jesus was angry with them. being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto them, Man, stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. And counsel against him, how they might destroy him. Luke checks, much along the same account. We see here one, it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first, that as he went through the cornfields, his disciples plucked ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And the certain of the Pharisees said unto him, Why do ye that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? And Jesus answering them said, Have you not read so much as this, when what David did when himself was an hungered and they were with him? How he went into the house of God and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priest alone. And he said unto them that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. And it came to pass also on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught, and there was a man whose right hand was withered. The scribes and Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find accusation against him. So Jesus was hated for doing good things, and he was put to death, not for any evil deed, because he did no evil deeds, but because he was good. Even today, the world does not always admire Jesus. A Christian is persecuted because he is different, for being a, quote, protruding nail that invites a hammer. A Japanese proverb says that a protruding nail invites a hammer. Peter said that sinners think it strange that Christians do not run with them in the excess of riot, speaking evil of you. He says that in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 4. The world thinks that Christians are peculiar. They do not dress in the... Now notice this. This is a description of a Christian. They do not dress in the same revealing clothes. They do not go to sinful recreation. They do not destroy the alcohol and drugs. And they do not pursue worldly possessions and acclaim, yet they give away some money to help the church causes. If Christians were of the world would put its stamp of approval on them. Let that sink in for a minute. Who's the world approving? If someone claims to be a Christian and the world is approving of them, perhaps they're not truly a Christian. Generally, people like those who conform to their customs, look at things the same way, and share the same biases. Let's look at John chapter 15 and what Jesus had to say about that. John chapter 15, verses 18 through 21. If the world hate you, this is Jesus speaking. If the world hate you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my saying, they will keep yours also. But all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not him that sent me. Voltaire said, Our wretched species is so made that those who walk on the well-trodden path always throw stones at those who are showing a new road. Now, you want some Bible for that? Oh, we can look at some of that too. Matthew, matter of fact, I would prefer to look at that. And I prefer you would too. Because if we would make the Bible our sole standard instead of the sayings and proverbs of men, all this division and confusion that we could prevent and avoid. What did Jesus have to say about it? Matthew 10, verses 24 through 25. The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? Look at chapter 16. Matthew 16 and verse 24. What else did Jesus have to say about this on the line that man hates those who go against their thinking? Matthew 16, verse 24. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Luke 21, Jesus goes on, speaks about this some more. Luke 21, verse 17. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Acts 9. Yes. Acts chapter 9. Oh, sorry, got the wrong book there. Acts chapter 9 and verse 16. Jesus speaking to Ananias in regards to Saul. Start at verse 15. The Lord said unto Ananias, go thy way, for he, being Saul, is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. See, if you remember the story of Saul, Saul was persecuting Christians. And Ananias says, Jesus, this Saul dude, he's bad news. We don't need to be, in cahoots with him. But Jesus says, go thy way, for he is my chosen vessel. And he's going to find out what persecution is. And then I believe we looked at this, if memory serves me correct. We're going to look at 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through 16. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though something happened unto you. But rejoice, inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye. For the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. Let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other man's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. In verse 19, wherefore let them that suffer according to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator. The way to avoid persecution is obvious and easy: to live like the world, or at least live and let live. Or at least never criticize them. That will bring popularity. To get along with the world, to laugh at its jokes, to enjoy its entertainment, to smile when it mocks God and takes his name in vain, and to be ashamed to take a stand for Christ will remove all persecution. To fail as a Christian is not necessary to be worse than the man of the world. It is only necessary to be like him. When Delilah sought to know the secret of Samson's strength, he told her that if his vow was broken, he would, quote, be like any other man in Judges 16, verse 17, not weaker than any other man, not worse than any other man, but only like him. When Christians are not persecuted by society, it means they are reflecting rather than confronting that society. Romans chapter 12. Oh, if you don't know this verse, you'll remember it whenever we pull it up here. Romans chapter 12, because this is a problem that we all have. Romans 12, 1 through 2, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Don't be conformed. Don't be like the world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You have a different mindset. You're not thinking like the world. You're not acting like the world. And in doing so, you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. When the world is pleased with the church, listen closely. When the world is pleased with the church, we can be sure that heaven is not. If we please the world, we grieve the Lord. How do we know that? Let's look at Luke chapter 9. Look at a few verses along that line of thinking. Luke chapter 9, if we please the world, we grieve the Lord. Luke 9, verse 26, for whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and of the holy angels. What does James have to say about this idea of if the world pleases, if we please the world, we grieve the Lord? James chapter 4, verse 4. None of God. And finally, 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. The Apostle John, he writes and he says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away. But with the will of God abideth forever. One people hate Christians. A Christian is persecuted, he opposes, and people love to shoot the messenger. It is an unwritten code that Americans are to live and let live. We're expected to be so tolerant of other views that we never speak in opposition of others' beliefs or behaviors. Christians cannot remain silent and still preach the gospel. Look at Psalms. Look at Psalms 107, verse 2. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he hath redeemed from the hand of the enemy. If you're redeemed, if the Lord has saved you, let it be known. You can't be quiet about it. Sometimes when we preach the word, it is out of season. 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears, and they will turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. Look with me also at James chapter 5. Apologize for a little bit of the background noise. Traffic's getting a little heavy here. Verse 10. They were prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. The prophets spoke in the name of the Lord, and they were persecuted, but they learned because of it. We live in an upside down world. I actually love this verse right here, Acts chapter 17 and verse 6. And I wish more Christians would be like this, because Paul went into Thessalonica, and he went into the synagogue, and he, on the Sabbath day, and he reasoned out of the scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead. And notice verse 5. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took upon them certain lewd fellows, set all the city on an uproar. In a second. The Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and brought them, and sought to bring them out people. And when they found him not, they drew Jason and certain brethren and the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down have come hither also. Wouldn't it be great as a Christian to be described as someone who is turning the world upside down. When we try to set it right, some people resent it. Ahab hated Micaiah because, quote, he never prophesied good unto me, but always evil in 2 Chronicles 18, verse 7. Ahab accused Elijah of being a disturber of Israel because he preached against sin in 1 Kings 18, 17 through 18. Here you have Ahab, who couldn't keep his wicked wife in check, Jezebel, and he's going to call the prophet of God the troubler of Israel. And why was he calling a troubler? 1 Kings 18, 17 to 18. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. Here you had the people who were going against and contrary to God's will in Ahab, and he wants to accuse God's prophet of the one being the troubler of Israel. You're troublemakers whenever you are a Christian, and the world is going to persecute you for it. Marvel not, as we read in 1 John 3, verse 13, my brethren, if the world hate you, but thankfully greater is he that is in you that is in the world. 1 John 4, verse 4. Again, my name is Corey Smith. I'm with the Petersburg Church of Christ. I hope this has been helpful for you. And this is a track put out by Brother Alan Webster of the Jacksonville congregation in Jacksonville, Alabama. And this is Why Do People Hate Christians? I encourage you to go out there, be faithful to the Lord every day. Don't allow the persecution of the world to prevent you from going out and doing the work of the Lord, taking the gospel to every single person that you come into contact with. Hope you have a great day. Talk to you again soon.